What is up, everybody? I hope you are enjoying this episode of my man Adam Shell, and I wanted to take a second while I have your ear to let you know that next Thursday, October 17th from 7 to 9:30 p.m. EST, Breathe with Cannabis is back, and this month's theme is amazing. This month's theme is the Relationship Healing Edition. So whether or not you're having challenges in how you relate to yourself, your romantic partner, friendships, cannabis, anything in life, this workshop is going to be an amazing opportunity to come allow yourself to usher in your next level of evolution when it comes to your relationships, alongside our worldwide community of spiritual seekers just like you. So to find out more about the event and register, head down to the show notes for this episode, and I will see you all there. Now back to the show. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For us men, one of the challenges we face is how to find balance between the polarities of the savage and the saint within us. In order to express as a truly healthy man, we require both of these polarities to be expressed within our experience of life. That being said, in the modern day world, masculine energy is looked at by many to be quote-unquote toxic, when in reality, what the world calls toxic is not true masculinity whatsoever, but is rather an immature version of it touted as the quote-unquote real deal. So with all of that said, where does that leave us men? In my opinion, it leaves us in a confused place in which we require true masculine leaders to emerge and remind the men and the world at large what true, healthy masculine expression looks and feels like. And this is exactly why I am so excited for this week's podcast guest. He is the founder of the Savage and Saint Collective, whereby he mentors men on how to tap into the wholeness of these two polarities in order to add more vitality, more excellence, and more freedom to their lives. This episode is sure to open up some new perspectives for you and allow you to walk away with some real-world actionable steps we can each take, regardless of our gender, to actualize the goal of bringing back true masculinity to the world in a powerful way. So please, help me in welcoming my brother, Michael Holt, to the show. Michael Holt, my man. Dude, it has been a blast getting to network and get to know you over the last couple of weeks. You know, it was funny connecting with you, like I said in the intro, because I heard you years ago on Paul Chek's podcast, and I remember like really enjoying the podcast you did and also thinking like, man, dude, this guy is like Buddha reincarnated. Like the amount of calm you have in you, bro, is amazing. What's your sign right off the bat? What's your astrological sign?
I'm a Libra.
Ah,
Almost
Libra.
a Scorpio. I think I missed it by a day. Just like the last day of Libra.
Nice, man. I was wondering if you were like a Taurus or like an earth sign of sorts, because my girlfriend's much more into astrology than I am. I pretty much just know my sun sign and my moon and rising, but I've started to notice like that very calm Zen Buddha feel is big in Tauruses. So now I'll have to go back and figure out what else in your chart is leading to that, man. But super excited to have you on.
That doesn't really track with my experience with Tauruses. I know some raging bulls.
That's hilarious, bro. I apparently have met the two in my life that are the calmest, coolest, and most collected. You know, Rachel being one of them, and then Alex Morningstar being another one. But regardless, man, I'm super excited to have you on, brother. And you know, where I like to start every episode, and I know that we're going to get into some really juicy stuff here about integration and how to access psychedelic states even without accessing through psychedelic medicines. But before we get into that, I want to ask you like how you first got interested in the realm of psychedelics. And I don't just mean the medicines here. I mean living a life that is different than most people, because to me, life is the psychedelic, and the people that are kind of doing things differently are typically the people that I would call more psychedelic lovers, even if they're not connecting with psychedelics necessarily. So how did you first get interested in living this different type of life, you know, being open to psychedelic medicines from time to time in your life? How did that all transpire?
I would say it was a combination of, a willingness to explore psychedelic experience was a combination of looking for a way out of my own human suffering and also an authentic curiosity about deeper states of consciousness and, really like deep existential questions of what is reality? What am I? What is the self? What is the world? Are we different? Like the big questions, like what is really going on here? And so, a combination of those two, emotional pain and an inability to manage myself skillfully, coupled with, a real authentic desire to know the truth, motivated me to roll the dice with, my consciousness and explore.
Dude, I love that, man. And not on purpose, but by accident, I've kind of started a case study on this show where the answer you just gave is the answer that quite a few people on the show give, including myself, right? Like growing up and being in the modern day world, whether you want to call it the Matrix or whatever you want to call it, and just watching everyone go to 9-to-5s and do the safe bet in school. And it never resonated with me. But the challenge with me was that I didn't have a lot of people around me that were doing anything different. So I didn't have any context that there was differentiality in life. And when I found cannabis first and then psychedelics later on, that was the first time where I was like, yep, I knew there was always more to this. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of us, it's very validating because I don't know if your situation was similar, but let me just ask you, like, did you have a lot of people growing up around you that were doing things differently? Or were you more like me, had a lot of examples of people kind of just taking the normal paved path, not really questioning things? Like, which one of those do you fall more onto?
Definitely the latter. I come from blue-collar suburbs of Philadelphia. So, nobody was fucking talking about ayahuasca or, I mean, when I was a teenager, early teenager, we were smoking weed and doing mushrooms, but we weren't approaching it reverently with like the intention to evolve ourselves. We were just trying to trip out. Yeah. So no, I didn't really have a lot of models of individuals who were like really living their own life. Everybody was kind of, I mean, and I'm not talking down or badly about where I come from, but everyone just seemed to be content to maintain, the normalcy of modern culture.
Yeah.
And I was like you. I was like you. Not only did it's kind of like there's a rebellious nature in me that was much more pronounced when I was a younger man. It got me in a lot of trouble. So it made it hard for me to cram myself into like a square peg into a round hole. But on top of that, it was difficult for me to consistently show up to anything because my emotional ups and downs were very hard to, it was hard for me to find stability. So I wasn't built for a 9-to-5.
Yeah, 100%, man. I totally agree with that. And I'm glad I asked you because I just find a lot of the time that, very similar to you, I had a very rebellious spirit as a child as well and teenager. And I was good enough at getting away with things and I never got in too much trouble. But, I had to do a lot of planning to get away with a lot of the stuff that I was doing back then. And, I find that to be very common, especially in men, right? Like I think a lot of us have rebellious spirits and, kind of get drawn away from people that are just walking the normal path. Again, no judgment, but just, not my flavor of ice cream type thing, right? Mm-hmm. We want something different for ourselves. And, I find that, people that have an upbringing like that, where they're starting to realize they're rebellious, they're trying different things, they're doing these types of things that are very different from the norm, they end up living some really cool lives as long as they can balance each other out and things like that. Totally. And, my question for you is, to kind of jump forward a little bit, how did psychedelics, or did they continue to shape who you were becoming in your later years, right? I know we talked on our networking call about how these days, very similar to me, you're not hitting these buttons very often because you don't need to anymore. But how did that kind of transition go from, doing a lot when you were younger into now being much more balanced, much more reverent, much more respectful and everything with yourself and also with the medicine as well?
Well, I mean, it was never a lot when I was younger, but I definitely had some experiences. Particularly with marijuana and mushrooms. But like I said, there was never a container around them or a deep intention. I think that through the years, my primary exploration has been, a very diligent study of the practice of meditation. I've had the good fortune to really sit at the feet of some real deal teachers who frame the practice as the cultivation of specific skills that are meant to bring about a direct experience of liberation from the self experience, to start to really be able to abide in a state of uninterrupted awareness that becomes very psychedelic. I mean, reality is the real psychedelic. It's just, you have to develop a very concentrated mind to begin to settle in to the present moment, because the present moment it's a miracle. It's beautiful. It defies, it's God, and it's a complete trip. And so as I went deeper and deeper into the path of meditation, and I started to actually feel motivated enough to go on formal, long, silent retreats, and I started to kind of contact the psychedelic nature of reality without the use of any substances at all. And I actually heard some of my teachers talk about their exploration of psychedelics, and I thought, okay, maybe there's something here. So I approached substances now with a whole new mindset and a whole new appreciation for what's possible, and a reverence. And I approached them to kind of help me contact what is possible with meditation, to see, to maybe glimpse reality as it is, to use the substances that I came to realize were naturally occurring, placed here by Creator to evolve human consciousness so that we can more accurately see what we really are and what this really is. And so that became my motivation to deepen my meditative skills by intentionally destabilizing my perception of ordinary reality so that I could contact deeper layers of myself and deeper layers of, God.
Man, I love that. And, it perfectly tees up the next question I have for you, which is, we know right now that, a lot of people are calling it the psychedelic renaissance, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people are finding out about psychedelics. And my worry about that, I don't know if I'd call it a worry, but, my challenge with this is that psychedelics are kind of like jet fuel, or let's call it nitrous, actually. They're kind of like nitrous. And if you got a built out car, like someone yourself who's been meditating, spiritual practice, disciplined, etc., and also has intention, understands what the nature of reality is, at least to a basic level, right? Some kind of awareness on what's going on here. And you choose to connect with a psychedelic, like you said, to, allow you to reach even farther and see what's possible. So then you can stabilize and integrate that into your day-to-day reality. Well, then, yeah, psychedelics could definitely be beneficial. But, when we think about the average human being, especially in America, who's eating fast food, drinking tap water, all of these things, right? Which again, not judging here, but if you're driving like a 1988 Honda Civic and you put NOS in that thing, worst case, it's just not going to work, or best case, it's not going to work. Worst case, it's going to blow the entire engine up. So I'm curious for you, man, like what you found, especially in being a men's coach as well and working so intimately with men, and this can also be for women as well, but I'll ask you more on the men's side since I know you specialize in that. What have you found the value to be in your own life and also the men that you serve in having a solid foundational spiritual practice, whether that be breath work, meditation, a combination of the two, affirmations, whatever it is, but some type of non-negotiable every single day in that kind of realm, like a spiritual practice, with regards to how psychedelics can actually support someone in their life? Like, do those things lead to someone? Have you noticed them leading to something that allows psychedelics to work more efficiently and effectively in those people that have that foundation?
Absolutely. I would say that I would be one of those people. And bro, I love that analogy of putting NOS in an 88 Civic. That's brilliant. It's something I've said too. It's like, some of these substances are very powerful and they're going to break apart ordinary reality. And if you have done the mundane work of opening your perception to that experience without substances, through breathing, through just eating well, through meditation, then you're kind of primed for that experience. So although it will be, there's no way to prepare for something like that, it'll be destabilizing, but at least there's some degree of openness to it. But I always say, like, if you're like a fucking tax accountant in Des Moines, Iowa, and you go to a ayahuasca ceremony and the door gets kicked right off the hinges, it's going to be pretty hard to show up for work on Monday and find the ground. It could be a while before you can put the pieces back together and function. Yeah. So yeah, to your point, I look at a daily life, and the analogy that I always give is supplements and weight training. I know you're in the weight room,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
you know, there are supplements on the market that you can leverage to amplify the hard work that you're doing in the weight room. But supplements on their own are not going to get you very far and arguably could be harmful. So the daily practices, the daily rituals that you do in your sober, mundane life it's like tilling the soil that is going to allow for the seeds that are planted through the psychedelic experience to actually have somewhere to germinate and develop and flower into improved conduct, improved insight, greater meaning in your life, greater capacity to love and to connect. But if you're not tilling the soil, then the psychedelic experience just becomes a trippy dream that you once had. Best case scenario.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, it becomes, a break in the fabric of your mind that can cause, psychotic states even. So we have to respect these substances and prepare for them. That's how we pay our respects, by showing up ready. And the way we do that is, how do you live your daily life? And the more you live your daily life in a way that is conducive to having a beneficial psychedelic experience, the less you actually ever need to go have a psychedelic experience.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I remember when I started doing breath work, I really enjoyed it because being in Aries or whatever it is, I just like more active stuff. I love meditation. And in these days, I absolutely love it. I look forward to it. But when I first got into spiritual practice, I was like, meditating's boring. I'll do breath work. And I remember that, I had some, I don't know, cool experiences, nothing that crazy with breath work, but it was always fun for me. I would do cold plunges and things like that. But I never really understood when people said breath work could be a psychedelic. And, I understood the science behind it of like, okay, we release endogenous DMT when we breathe, et cetera, et cetera. But I was never really getting the experiences that people were talking about. And then I remember there was a time, this is like a perfect example of how you're doing the work, you connect with a psychedelic, it expands you, and then you integrate into your sober reality. And that's why I wanted to lay this out. So I went to a retreat that a buddy of mine hosted in December of 2021. And we went there and we had an LSD day. There was like 4 days before this where we were doing combo and also just completely sober days, fasting and whatnot. But the last day there, we did an LSD ceremony. And a gentleman at the retreat and I had been breaking off on our own to just go do breath work whenever there was like stuff going on or whatever. So we have been doing this style that, I call DMT breathing. I'm sure someone else has come up with that name before, but I just call it DMT breathing. It's very quick. It's not like Wim Hof or even holotropic where you're going to be doing these long rounds. This is like, you got 5 minutes, cool. You can blast a couple rounds, have some fun, and get some, cold exposure in if you want to do that after or whatever. So we have been doing that and, just getting cool results, nothing to write home about. And so now we're on LSD and I lead a cannabis ceremony. Bunch of people that you would probably know were there too. I won't mention their names, just, for safety's sake. But, we're all there hanging out and we had this beautiful cannabis ceremony with probably 25, 30 people that, joined in for the ceremony. And at the end, I just decided, I was like, oh, this was such a beautiful ceremony. Let's close it out with some Paul Chek, raise your hand and Om, right on the way down. And let's just do one round of breath work to kind of close this thing out. And I really thought I was just going to close out this container with the breath work. It was going to be normal, whatever. Well, we did a round of just 10 breaths, right? Just 10 fast breaths, breathe in, hold, squeeze, right? Little DMT hit. And all of us went to like planet Neptune, man. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it felt like a slingshot. And so when we came back, everyone was like, did you know that was going to happen? I was like, I had no idea, guys. I wish I could say I knew, but I did not know it was going to go that deep. So we did a bunch of more rounds and they were really wild experiences happening. People were tapping out every single round from some kind of stuff going on. And after that, I realized, wow, this goes way deeper than I thought. And ever since then, when I do breath work, like when I do breathe with cannabis, I always do it in the sober state because I just guide better in a sober state than an altered state. And so I'm doing the breath work completely sober, right? Even the caffeine is out of my system by that time of night. And I'll have some of the most psychedelic experiences of my life. I mean, full on visions, forgetting where I am, forgetting my name, the whole thing. There's like half the time where Chris will be talking on the microphone and all of a sudden I'll be like, what's that? I'll just have a little peak of awareness, like, what's that sound? And then I'm like, oh, I'm in a workshop. Oh, it's my workshop. Oh my God, my name is Ryan. Oh, I got to get back to the screen. And so it's really funny how when you integrate these things, you can still get there in a completely sober state. Have you found those kind of similar things to be true?
Absolutely. You're accessing a state of awareness through manipulating your breath in which your connection to the self-experience softens. And you start to, your perception is that the self-experience is arising within the larger space of awareness that you are. And yes, that's available as an abiding state, really, through the practice of meditation. You know, that's 24/7. That's the masters. That's the bar they call us toward, is to live there. You can live there, and you can function very highly there. But yes, I've been a pulmonaut for years, and I've explored my breath daily, vigorously, and I have breathed myself into some transcendent states. And I'm my gift and my curse is that when I'm into something, I go for it. And so with breath practice, there has been many times where I've fallen over from my meditation cushion and, damn near passed out. That's happened a lot. But now I think through consistent practice, the minimal effective dose of breathing required to alter your state gets lower and lower and lower, and to the point where you can really intentionally govern the musculature of the deeper abdominals and generate just the right amount of tension and just the right amount of relaxation. You can have a completely transcendent experience in the space of one breath at will. You can really use your breath like a spear to break apart ordinary reality and to kind of just take a warm bath into this infinite, spacious freedom of awareness, and then back into Ryan, back into Michael, back into the conversation, back into fucking paying for your food at Whole Foods. It's always available, always right here. And that's, you make a great point. LSD can show you the way. It can become the leading edge, and your breath practice without substance can eventually catch up to the psychedelic experience. And your meditation practice can eventually catch up to the breath practice. And as time goes on and you're advancing in these three categories, you find that your everyday kind of state, when you're not trying to do anything at all, is leaning more toward the transcendent, the mystical, really. It's a mystical experience of life, which is the spiritual path.
Yeah. Dude, you poetically said that perfectly, man. And that has been exactly what has transpired for me. Have you ever read a book called The Disappearance of the Universe before?
No, never read that one.
It's a really good book, man. I read it recently.
I think I heard of it.
Yeah, it's from this guy, Gary Renard. And
I have heard of it.
Yeah, one of my really good buddies, Aaron Abkey, is a huge teacher of A Course in Miracles. And I work with his business partner, too, Mark Anthony Lord, who was recently on the show. And he's also a really amazing teacher of the Course. And so I've been hearing about A Course in Miracles through a lot of different avenues for a long time. Because I was never raised religious, I don't have any dogmatic views around Jesus or God or using those terminologies. I don't mind using creator, but God has no charge behind it for me. It doesn't mean Christian God or anything like that. Same with the Holy Spirit. I think of the Holy Spirit like the higher self. You can change these words in and out. But the way I've looked at it is, in this book, they talk about how really the only medicine there is forgiveness. And, in terms of how you do that, yeah, you can meditate, you can do breath work, you can do all these things. But as you forgive, what they actually say, which I love, and I'm curious if you resonate with this, is they're saying, because I know you'll get this, they're not saying forgive what was done. They're saying forgive what never actually happened, because this is all a dream, right? This is all an illusion. It doesn't actually exist. Like Michael actually doesn't exist. Ryan doesn't actually exist. We're essentially what the book would say, the Son of God experiencing itself, and daughter as well, right? Androgynous, but, like experiencing itself. And so when let's say that you kick my foot or something, right? The old way of forgiving that we were taught through religion and whatnot would be like, well, I forgive Michael because I know I should forgive him, but fuck that guy. Like, I hope he gets his foot kicked too, but I'll forgive him, right? It's kind of like this like weird version of forgiveness. Whereas this is like, let's say you kick my foot, I get triggered. Well, in that moment, I get to forgive myself. Oh my goodness, I just believed the dream again. And oh my goodness, Michael never did that because this is just a dream. And I know that can sound kind of like out there to anyone who hasn't meditated a lot or done breath work or done psychedelics or anything we're talking about. But I'm curious if you resonate with that, because this book really changed a lot for me, man. I'm reading his second book now called Your Immortal Reality. And it's just so simple, because what I found is that the closer you get to oneness, God, creator, whatever you want to call it, the simpler things get. Like you were talking about, right? Like it's a very small shift from like regular consciousness to what you call enlightenment. That's why the old quote says, what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. What do you do after? Chop wood, carry water. It's a very small shift, but very significant shift. But at the end of the day, I'm just curious if that resonates with you, because that's been something that's, really been like, eyeing me up here. It's really interesting.
It is interesting. The one thing that comes up to me when you describe it that way is the danger of spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
It's like, well, somebody kicked you. Well, he didn't really kick me. None of this is real. So I'll just let motherfuckers kick me. Or I can kick people because none of this is real. So who cares? So there is a very slippery slope to allow a transcendent state or the perceptual experience of what we might call ultimate reality to allow for conduct that is not skillful, because nothing really matters. You're not really here. This is just a dream. There's no consequences. And people do that. You have a lot of highly realized teachers who are founts of wisdom because of their perceptual abilities, but they act like assholes. And that's not cool. So my teacher always says, conduct as fine as barley flour, insight as vast as the sky. I mean, it's a quote from an ancient Tibetan mystic. I forgot who, but that's the line we have to hold. But yeah, there's like, there is relative reality. It's not, there is me, there is you, but we can kind of travel between different states of consciousness that offer different vantage points. And we can see, we can access a vantage point that we could call non-duality, which I think is akin to the way you describe forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is relaxing the perceptual experience of an internal self and an out there world that are two separate things. And forgiveness is this relaxation, not just relaxing your muscles, but relaxing your perceptual system that fixates things into self and other, to learn. And you can learn. It's a combination of skills. Anyone can learn. It takes a bit of practice, but it's available to anyone. You can relax that reactive othering and forgive your perceptual experience. And that is to have the direct experience, not as a spiritual platitude that all is one, but to experience it directly. And then to allow that direct experience to change the very fabric of who you are and how you show up in the world.
Yeah. Dude, I love that, man. And yeah, I should have given that caveat that, this does not mean just let people kick you whenever, or just bypass and be like, oh, it didn't really happen. Like they even say in the book, like, no, if someone wrongs you, put up boundaries, like defend yourself if you have to, if someone's coming after you, like all of that is all good, because like you said, it is paradoxical. Like, yes, this is all real, right? In the 3D plane or however you want to call it, just like a dream is real while you're in it, and the way they talk about it in the book that I really enjoyed, it was a great analogy that I imagine you'll resonate with too, is, I think for at least me, I won't project it on you or anyone else, but when you start getting tastes of this, right, this idea we're talking about of non-duality or getting closer to God or enlightenment, whatever term you want to put on it, this feeling of being more at home within what you truly are, as you start to get closer to that point, it's very interesting that not only do things get simpler, like I mentioned before, but also what starts happening is, in a lot of ways, you start realizing like, oh, wait a minute, I want to be able to tell everyone about this. I want to go tell my parents. I want to go tell my friends. I want to tell everyone to wake up within the dream and all of these things, right? And I think a lot of the time that comes from a place of good intention, but, we never know what karmic cycle we're interfering with. And that's been something I've had to, really get a hold of the last, like, say, 5 years, because, as you start experiencing more love, you want everyone you love to experience it too. But the funny thing that the book says about it is that they give this analogy of like, let's picture that you're a parent and you go in to your child's room and you see that they're having a nightmare, right? They're kind of like rustling around and whatnot. Are you going to run up to them and shake them awake? No, you're not going to shake them awake. That would freak them out, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to sit on the edge of the bed. Maybe you're going to rub their leg and tell them, hey, it's okay. It's not real. It's just a dream. It's okay. And because you're being calm and soft with it, and you're just gently touching them, eventually they open their eyes and they realize all is good. That analogy is kind of like what we're all doing for each other if we're coming from a very high level point of view, we're not trying to rush anyone else's quote unquote waking up, because for all we know, if we are infinite beings and we go through reincarnation, if you choose to believe that, like we have infinite times to figure this out. And at the end of the day, it might not be someone else's time to figure that out. And it's very easy as a human that, is in this experience to think, oh, they're missing out. Like they're not getting the experience they should be getting, like I'm getting. But at the end of the day, that might actually be exactly what their soul requires for the next lifetime to wake up a little more. And so I'm curious for you too, like, when you started getting into this stuff, meditating, psychedelics, all the things we're talking about, did you also have that urge to want to go like share it with everyone, even though certain people maybe were standoffish about it, maybe didn't really want to hear it? And if so, how did you handle that? Because I have a lot of listeners that reach out that are having family members that, are stuck in doom and gloom thinking or victim mentality. And they're like, Ryan, I just want to wake them up. And I'm like, listen, I get that comes from a place of good intention. But if someone isn't making the invitation, not only is it falling on deaf ears, but it's actually like, kind of interfering with their free will. So I'm curious if you've dealt with that challenge before. What is up, family? I wanted to take a second while you're tuning in to tell you about an amazing new product I recently began using. Now, you guys know I do ads very rarely, and my promise to you is that anything I speak about is something I personally have found value in using regularly. Well, recently, I came across a company called Brain Supreme, who sells microdoses of mushrooms mixed with adaptogens, nootropics, and other additions as well. And even though I've microdosed off and on for years, I have never felt results like these. In only 2 weeks, I'm sleeping better, I have far less mind chatter, my ability to perform has exponentially improved, and best of all, the sense of inner peace I've been feeling is like nothing I've ever experienced in microdosing before. Right now, you can get 15% off of any of their products when you use code SPRAGUE15 at checkout. And to find out more about them and grab some for yourself, head down to the show notes for this episode and begin your journey into microdosing today. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I would say to a certain extent. I think it's natural if you find something that really works to alleviate your suffering. You want to share it with people that you love who you feel are suffering. But to your point, if you're offering advice or a path to somebody who hasn't asked for your advice or a path, both parties lose, because the experience of getting that information is like, well, I'm not good enough, so I have to make these changes. And the experience of giving the information is the person's not necessarily ready. They're not interested. They didn't ask. Think of all the things that you had to go through. I don't mean you personally, but anyone who's listening, to get you to a place where you were interested in the things that you came to be interested in, where you had the courage to take a leap and do something, risky that ended up growing you. You have to come to that in your own time. So I'll even say the same thing on the men's retreats that I teach, which, by the way, we don't use any substances, but we all experience altered states. And I'll tell everybody on the first day and the last day, do yourself a favor and don't go back out in the world and be like, oh, we did this and we did that and we did this. Let this experience just kind of matriculate through your system and wait until you have an accurate kind of view on what you just went through, really, before you start telling everybody else that they should do it. Because if you share an experience, be it psychedelic or otherwise, with somebody who wasn't there, in sharing that experience, you might be met with a quizzical look or a, wait, you did what? Or you felt what? And now you start to second guess something that you went through that felt good. So I think with regard to a psychedelic experience or any kind of spiritual discipline or any kind of transcendent state that you reach, let your motivation, your authentic heart's motivation to save the world and to help people, let your actions be the way that you do that. Don't proselytize, don't preach, don't tell other people what they should do. Just allow your conduct to be skillful and love people where they are and meet people where they are. And the people who are interested in what you're into will come to you. And then tell them everything you learned and everything you think and everything that they could do if they were so interested. But wait until they ask, because if they don't ask, unsolicited self-improvement advice is fucking mean.
It's so true, man. It's so true, and that's something that, I definitely had to figure out the hard way, because like, again, like it's such a thirst trap because you think the ego makes you think you're doing something good. But how people feel when they're hearing you basically like push this stuff on them is exactly like you said, like, oh, why do you think I need this? Am I not good enough, etc. Versus like, if you just become the embodiment of what you would otherwise state to someone, the right people will notice and go, hey, man, you look really happy. What have you been up to? Or, hey, I see you crushing it in your relationship and business, etc. Like, what's your secret? And that's their soul saying, hey, I'm ready for what you have to share with me.
That's it.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was in a course with Paul Chek, and he told me that I need to read this book called Return to the One. I forgot the name of the author, but it was a book about the Greek philosopher Plotinus. And Plotinus has a quote in the book. I don't remember it verbatim, but it's something like, a real philosopher doesn't have to say what their philosophy is. They're living it moment by moment to the point where if you just observe them, you know what it is. So if your philosophy is to want to help people and be a light of love and help people find their greatest self, then do that through action, not through what you say.
Yeah, dude. Plotinus, man, always coming in clutch, dude. I hear Paul talk about that often on the show, or when I used to listen to the show anyway. I haven't kept up recently, but it's so true, man, and I got to check out that book because I've heard Paul mention it before, and this is like the universe pinging it to me again. What was the name of that one more time?
Return to the One.
Return to the One. I'm going to write that down. I'm always looking for...
I think it's Brian Hines, and it's his examination of some of the writings of Plotinus.
Oh, that is amazing, man. And, one thing you brought up there that I'd love to expand on a little bit is, you do men's work, and, you do it very well as well. I mean, like, what you're doing with men is incredible, man. I mean, with the Savage and the Sane and everything you're doing, for any man listening to this show right now, or any woman that knows a man that is in need of some support, some guidance, etc., I just want to give Michael a shout out for that because he's literally world class at what he does. But one of the things that, yeah, of course, man. And one of the things that I'm curious for you on is I find a lot of men, especially with the lack of rites of passage happening in society today, kind of use psychedelics as a stand-in for rites of passage. What are your thoughts on that? Have you seen that trend? Or I don't think it's an actual trend of men saying it, but have you noticed that uptick? And if so, like, being is how you work in that realm. What are your thoughts on it? Do you have any certain, ideas on what we could do with that? If that's playing Russian roulette, does it have a place? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
It's a very good question. I think, I would say there is a correlation between our lack of rites of passage and the exploration of psychedelic medicine. And actually, I never really thought of it this way, but that's probably why I got it. That's probably why I was so curious. I mean, I went to Peru when I was like late 20s, I think. And maybe if there was some ritual, like I had to build my own rite of passage with what was available to me. So, what do we do as a culture to shift that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I kind of think of it this way, right? Like, I understand why men specifically would, or anyone, not even necessarily just men, would go to a psychedelic for rites of passage, because you talk about going to Peru or something, those are areas where rites of passage still exist, at least more than they do in like modern Western, countries and things like that. Albeit you're kind of like bypassing a lot of the other stuff that goes along with it just for like that grandiose experience. But it does kind of give people a quick ROI. It's kind of like, for instance, like if you're a fitness instructor and you want a man to realize that, you're a good fitness instructor, you make him get big biceps, right? Or whatever he thinks matters. And he's like, oh my God, you got me bigger arms. Now I'm in, right? So like, I understand it from like a quick ROI type thing. Like, hey, there's more than meets the eye here. And I will show you an experience that allows you to see that. And then, okay, now that we've had that experience, let's figure out how to stabilize that through sober work, through integration and things like that. But it is interesting to think about, what role psychedelics play in a rites of passage type ritual. Do they play a role there? I think they do as well. But I think that, one of the things I'm going to ask you about right after, I think the number one thing missing in a lot of these is integration, and I think that's why people go from ceremony to ceremony. And I'm not, like I say all the time, I'm not here to judge anyone. I've done a lot of psychedelics, but what I've learned over the time is that the goal is to be high all the time on your own supply. Like, I think anyone listening, would you want to be high all the time? More than likely, but that you can't use an exogenous substance to be able to get that every single day, right? You either fall into addiction, they stop working, etc. So I'm curious for you, man, just to open up a big conversation here. What does integration look like for you, and what does it mean to you as an individual? And also maybe you can extrapolate it into how you view it when it comes to your clients, the men you work with, etc. I'm just curious to see what you'd say on that.
I would say integration, like I said earlier, is how you approach your daily life. How do you ritualize your daily life? How do you spend your time? Are you actively engaged in a day that is conducive to insight? Are you living in the kind of a flow where when you go to bed at night, you have more energy than when you woke up in the morning? Are you cultivating energy, or are you living in a depleted cycle? Basically, it occurs to me now, what I teach, and I don't bring psychedelics into my work at all, but I teach integration. That's what I teach. And the more integrated you live in your daily life, like I said before, the less that the psychedelic experience really calls to you, because you're living. Integration is tilling the soil so that it's fertile, so that the seeds of insight can sprout. And like I said before, in the absence of a ritualized daily life that pays attention to the 6 foundation principles, state of your mind, depth of your breath, quality of your sleep, nutrition, hydration, and movement. If you check those 6 boxes, you'll be amazed at the creative insights that come through you. You'll be amazed at how you can reframe problems. You'll be amazed at how you can access deeper states of tranquility, peace. So integration is allowing the seeds to sprout. Well, yeah, integration is daily life. And I agree with you 100% because I've seen the same thing. Individuals who go from ceremony to ceremony, do more medicine. I want to do more medicine. Wait a minute. Do you have even a shred of discipline to stop eating junk food and to sit still for 10 minutes a day? Or are you kind of in a lazy way passing the buck to some cactus juice to try to get you to behave better? You know, at a certain point, it just comes down to, it's a matter of discipline.
Yeah.
And so these substances will help you, but only if you're helping yourself. If you're not helping yourself and you continue to show up to ceremony and to medicine, it doesn't occur to the individual, but the people around them can kind of see and feel. They're just spiraling further and further off the ground and kind of losing contact with reality.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see.
It is, man. It really is. And one of the things I feel too is I like to use this analogy to kind of drive it home. It's like, you know, if you have a virus on your computer, which would be resonant to a limiting belief, an unconscious story, something that you're unaware of, but you're living in some kind of suffering. You don't really know what it is. Maybe you're not smart on computers or whatever. So you just know that your computer is going slower. So you find through a series of different, events that you can start the computer on safe mode. And if you start it on safe mode, you can kind of use it, right? But since you don't know how to fix it in its normal operating system, you just stick on safe mode forever. And what ends up happening is you miss out on a lot of the other aspects that you could utilize through the normal operating system because you don't have the context of what a virus is. You don't know that you then have one, and you don't know that it can be fixed. And you also don't know that to fix it, you have to go into the normal operating system at some point. You can't just stay in safe mode forever, right? You have to go fix things maybe in safe mode and then go back to your normal operating system. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused. And, what I always say is, I don't know if it's any of our fault that we're this confused because white bread is on the food pyramid. So if that's true, let's just think about how backwards everything is. But it now gets to be our responsibility and opportunity to do something different about it. And that's one of the great things about, the modern day world with podcasts and all these things is we get a lot more information now that, we didn't get even 10 years ago, let alone 30, 50, 100 years ago. And so at the same time, integration is where we actually stabilize and literally reintegrate. I mean, what psychedelics do is they disintegrate us, which can be great to start to see like, oh, wow, there actually is beauty in life. Oh, my goodness, I had no context. I forgot. I just thought I was living in suffering constantly. Now I know there's something to work towards. But if you don't ever learn the path of what to practice from there after that, then you're going to mistakenly think that the only way to get there is by taking more medicine. And what I always tell people is what's different from that and the way that the pharmaceutical industry operates. There's not really much difference. Yes, they may be less dangerous to a certain degree. I mean, again, psychedelics can be very mind-shattering. So there is a lot of risk involved when it comes to that kind of stuff, especially like you were saying earlier, if someone doesn't have any context of the other world that exists all around us, that is our real home, and then someone experiences that, it could completely shatter their lease on reality. But at the same time, like, we want to understand that we are drugs, like we have all this inside of us, right? Like, a perfect example is with MDMA. MDMA is not actually giving us an effect. It's essentially providing a code for our body to dump its own chemicals and hormones, which allow us to feel how we feel. So the idea is, what if we can teach the mind how to do that at will? Maybe not the exact same way MDMA does, for instance, but, like you were saying, through breath work, if we understand that through the breath, we can release DMT. We understand what DMT can do, and we understand what to utilize in that state and how to do it and how to go through it. Well, then we can have a psychedelic experience that rivals any straight up DMT experience. But the great thing is we did it on our own supply, and we can come back within 5 minutes and be completely back to normal. But, that integration phase is essential, because if you look at even like, fitness, right? We'll use that as an example. If you go to the gym 5 days in a row to do chest, that's just irresponsible and dangerous, bro, right? You're going to like pull muscles. You're not going to be able to give your muscles time to heal. There has to be integration time. And during that integration time, you're not just going to sit in a chair and watch Netflix and eat Cheetos. You're going to like be stretching. You're going to be mobilizing. You're going to be paying attention to your posture. Those are kind of like synonymous with what we're talking about in the psychedelic space, right? Like, you want to be able to have this grandiose experience if you want to have one, and then come back and understand how to meditate, how to do breath work, how to make sure your food is clean, your water's clean, how to make sure you're having hard conversations with your romantic partner, with friendships, with business partners, whatever those things are, to make sure that you are showing up for yourself at the end of the day. And all of that works to integrate what you've learned in these experiences. And then before you know it, like we've been talking about, you don't even need the medicine anymore. You've become the medicine. And now you are the psychedelic. When you walk into a room and people feel the energy of it, the right people that are right for you at that time will start asking, dude, what are you doing? And so in a big way, you are the pattern interrupt for these people now. You are like the mushroom to them, And so it's really interesting, this kind of idea of becoming the psychedelic, becoming the medicine. It's really cool.
It's an interesting point you made about MDMA kind of instructing your body on how to dump the feel-good hormones. It's like it is coming from within you. And that actually is a state that is available without substance. I would say the barrier to entry is concentration, establishing concentration. And like I said, I've had the good fortune of studying with teachers, real deal meditation teachers who frame the practice as this cultivation of specific skills. And it becomes abundantly clear to me that the foundational skill that must be developed for meditation practice to bear fruit is concentration. It's not sexy to cultivate concentration. It's not fun. It's not relaxing. It's difficult, actually, and it requires intensity and effort and consistency. I'm on a soul mission to disabuse men, particularly, of the notion that meditation is kumbaya, kind of passive, pleasant experience. It might be pleasant experience, but it's work. But if you develop that foundational muscle of concentration, you develop a capacity called metacognition, which is the ability to kind of reflect upon your own mind moment by moment. And then it becomes clear to you all of the discursive thoughts, the thousands of thoughts that you're having every day that are bumming you out. Your mind is like, it can be a laser beam if you learn how to concentrate. But the untrained mind is like this just weak, diffuse light that shines everywhere but nowhere in particular. And the untrained mind, we generate all kinds of emotional experience through our imagination that is afflictive. Concentration begets this newfound capacity to intentionally direct the mind to the object of concentration, whatever it is. It could be your breath. It could be the sense of your body. It could be the external visual field. It could be the intentional cultivation of positive states. And when you bring that savage capacity to concentrate, to direct your mind, to eviscerate thinking at the root and direct your mind intentionally, you can direct that power to the cultivation of the beneficial, positive qualities, and you can become quite a saint. You feel like a saint. You're so happy, and everyone thinks, oh, wow, he's so zen. He's so peaceful. What they don't know is that underneath the exterior of an authentically joyful yogi is a fucking psycho who learned how to concentrate to the point where they can reliably access feeling states. They don't need substances. They don't need MDMA. They can really bliss out.
Yeah, dude, I love that, man. And, it's so cool. That's why I love your brand name, The Savage and the Saint, because when we were connecting and you shared with me like how you came up with that name and what it represents, it's so true, man. Like, I'm a very joyous individual. And, my good friends that I hang out all the time understand that I'm, everything, right? Like I have my challenging days and things like that. But one of the things that came easy for me for whatever reason was discipline. But what didn't come easy for me was making sure that I was picking the right things to be disciplined with. Because there's also like, I don't want to call it a downside necessarily, but a challenge that can happen within being disciplined. Like, for instance, like when it came to the gym, even if I woke up and my body was screaming at me, like, don't work out today, I was like, I'm just going to, no pain, no gain, go through it, right? And so at the end of the day, like that needed shaping as well, So whether or not, for anyone listening, you're on the side of like, oh, I need more discipline, or you're on my side where it was like almost, you had too much discipline, but it wasn't being put in the right areas. Both sides require balance and finding a middle ground and making sure that you are sustainable and consistent in being able to be that savage and the saint, as you put it really well, really well. And one of the things that I found is that, when you can do that, I mean, think about like, I meant to say this too. You're saying concentration is the number one thing, right? And I agree with that. Think about how challenging that is in the world today, right? Or put it this way, it's actually not any more challenging than it was, but think about how many more excuses people have that it's going to be challenging. And I get it, guys, right? Like I turn on my phone in the morning, I turn it off airplane mode to go start my meditation timer, and there's a bunch of notifications going off. And every single morning without fail, my mind tells me, dude, you don't need to meditate today. Just hop right into it. Don't worry about it. Just go start writing emails, make a coffee, do these things. I have to show myself over time, like, hey, it's fine. I have those thoughts. I'm not even going to try to fight them, because to fight them would make them more real. I'm just going to go forth and do exactly what I know every single day I'm doing is a non-negotiable, which every single day for me, I start out with a 30-minute meditation. I was doing 20 for a while, but what I was finding is that, and I usually do like a TM style. I just like, silent Buddha style, mantra or breath, one or the other. And what I was finding was that at about minute 18 was when I really started getting into that bliss state, and then my timer would go off. So for whatever reason, I'm sure other people might be able to get there a lot quicker than me, but it took me a little bit longer. So for someone listening, if you're like me and you're finding like a minute 18, you're just starting to get into like the real giblets of what meditating can do, try increasing it. Like I went to a mystery school one time that basically said if everyone could meditate for 2 hours every day, we'd reach enlightenment a lot quicker. And being is how I've meditated at least 30 minutes a day for a long time, I could totally see that. I mean, God, when I meditate just for an hour in the day, like 30 in the morning, maybe 30 in mid-afternoon or nighttime, dude, it is incredible how much it can shift. And I'm curious for you, like, for someone listening who's maybe like, oh man, I'm really resonating with this, but where do I start? What would you say in terms of a good place to start? Are there any certain meditation styles that you really enjoy? Is there a certain time allotment that you would have someone start with? Like, what would be your advice on for someone like that?
I would think that a good place to start would be to develop concentration. And you would want to be in contact with a teacher who actually knows what they're talking about and can help you develop a concentration practice. And you can see for yourself how in the space of like, let's say 2 weeks, you can really strengthen your capacity to concentrate on the meditation object. Formal period of practice, I would say minimum is 10 minutes. But as practice deepens through time, there's the distinction between formal meditation practice and life really blurs. And you develop this capacity to just really pour the fullness of your attention on the thing that you're doing, so that emails becomes just as meditative as sitting on your meditation cushion. That's the high bar. The masters in this practice, they'll sit because why not? But they don't have to meditate. My teacher Shinzen used to say, early stages of the practice, meditation is something that you do during your day. As you remain consistent, there's a figured ground reversal, so that your day is something that unfolds within the container of your unbroken meditation. But, you mentioned about bliss at 18 minutes. I think if an individual's expectation is bliss, they're setting themselves up for failure. Don't expect bliss. Develop concentration. It's, it really actually bothers me. And I'm not saying that you're doing this, but when I hear people frame the practice as like a warm bath, and it's just so nice and it's so mellow. Well, when people inevitably don't have that experience, they come to the conclusion that I'm not good at this or this isn't for me. But like I said earlier, I'm trying to call men into this practice by reframing it as the real warrior work. You're learning to exercise mastery over your own mind. Your mind is a wild elephant. It needs to be tamed. The sacred texts say the rope and the whip are necessary at a certain point on the path. The rope and the whip are your ferocious determination, your discipline, your intensity. These are the qualities that are actually required for fruitful meditation practice, not passive kumbaya, states of bliss. So there's a lot of apps and stuff that people can use, but I think if you really want to understand in your direct experience what's possible through meditation, you have to be connected to a teacher who knows what's up. And the fact of the matter is most self-proclaimed meditation teachers don't know what's up. I'm not here to sling mud, but I live in Venice Beach, California, bro. Everybody's a fucking meditation teacher. Nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about. The real ones are rare. So you gotta, dig a little deeper and see if you can find somebody.
Yeah, dude, it totally makes sense. They actually say in Disappearance of the Universe too, which I found to be accurate in my life, that most truly enlightened people, which I don't even like to use that term, but I will use it for sake of a better term. Most people that are high level, enlightened, etc., they don't want to be known. They don't want to, they're not out there. They're not even saying they're a teacher. Like, you got to really search for them. I found 2 in my day, and both have been absolutely profound, like to a level where you just hang out with them and you're getting a lot of downloads and amazing stuff.
Totally.
It's funny because the second one I met, I knew it was legit because as soon as I found out about him, I hit up the number I was given by a buddy of mine and I get a call right away. And I was like, oh, this must be this guy. So I answer it and the girl's like, how'd you get this number? And I'm like, oh, my buddy Chris gave it to me. And she's like, okay, cool. What do you want to do with XYZ? I'm not going to say his name. I'll tell you privately, but I can't mention him on a podcast. They told me that. So they're like, what do you want to do with XYZ person? I'm like, oh, well, I found out about him through so-and-so. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, you can't talk about him on social media. Don't ever mention him on a podcast. And you can talk about him with your friends, but just know you will be judged on who you bring to us. Like, if you bring us someone kind of weird and they say they came through you, you're never going to see this guy again. Like, he's not out there. You can't find anything about him. So I was like, my curiosity is piqued. And I chatted with this guy, and very quickly I knew, like, oh, you're on a very different level. There's only one guy I've found that has been on a similar level. This guy, Don, out from Arizona. Mystical dude. Again, like, he's not as secretive, but he's not putting himself out there either. So it's very interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned what you mentioned about, meditation, because for me, meditating can be a lot of things. Like this morning, I sat there for 30 minutes and just repeated the mantra. And I don't think I got really anything in terms of like profoundness, bliss, whatever, but that's okay. Cause that's what I required today. That's where I was at. Other days I reach bliss. Some days the entire thing is me working through trauma and just breathing through fucking very uncomfortable feelings. It can be a lot of things, but the thing it's definitely not, that this is like the number one thing I find people get stuck on in meditation is, I tried meditating and all I do is think. I suck at this. And it's like, dude, that's actually why you're meditating, to really notice just how fucking crazy your mind is and to start juxtaposing yourself separate from that thing that is always thinking, but is not actually you. And so I think it's really cool that you mentioned that, because it is like one of those things that I think a lot of people get confused on, oh, meditation, just calm, peace. It's like, it can be, that's within the realm of possibility. But that is like one out of every 10 meditations for me. That is just like a nice, easy bliss experience. The other 9 are all sorts of interesting things, from challenging to just weird to everything in between. It's really cool.
I know that Dalai Lama was once asked about measuring your progress on the path, and his answer was something to the effect of, meditate every day, and every 10 years check in as to how you're progressing. So it's maybe not the best idea to kind of look back on every single individual period of practice and just show up every day. Yeah. Just the same way you do in the gym. You're not going to have one workout where your physique suddenly becomes the dream physique of your life. It's just the accumulation of many, 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 many periods of practice.
Yeah.
And so just become less concerned with some finish line, because there isn't one, and just do your best to relax. The more deeply I understand the practice through the good example of my teachers, the more I understand how simple it is. It's just chill, just relax, really just try to relax. That's because when we relax, we open into this view of the way things really are, and things are pretty beautiful. It's just hard to see with all the tension.
Yeah, dude, 100%. Mike, this has been amazing, man. I can't wait to have you back on. Maybe I'll be starting the Highly Optimized podcast again, and I'll have you on there. That's a little teaser for all you guys that tune in every week. But man, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to share where people can find you, where they can find out more about Savage and the Saint and everything you got going on, man.
Yeah, the best way to connect is to head over to savageandsaint.com, and you can subscribe to my newsletter. I write out a weekly reflection, and then you'll also stay in the loop for the men's retreat and my online program, which is the Masculine Vitality Program, which is actually really good for integration on the other side of experience, or preparation for an upcoming experience, or just how to amplify your vitality and how to ritualize your day in a way that you'll start to fall into this positive feedback loop of cultivating energy, pouring energy into the things that are meaningful, getting energy from the things that are meaningful, cultivating more energy. That's what vitality is. It's a state of being where you got more juice pumping through you than the hindrances that are holding you back. And that's a good place to live, man. It's available to anybody who just understands the basics. And you can also hit me on Instagram, Savage and Saint. But yeah, bro, it's a pleasure, man. I'm glad to be connected to you, and definitely be down to run it back on Highly Optimized one day in the not too distant future.
Yeah. Shout out to Jason Picard also for connecting us. That dude is so awesome.
Solid. Super solid guy. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. And Mike, I got one last question for you that I ask everyone that comes on the show. And that question is this. Let's say someone listens to this episode and they're excited to look into psychedelic medicines in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would relay to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not medicines like psychedelics are right for them in their life at this time?
When faced with a difficult decision, the warrior takes 7 breaths. At the end of 7 breaths, he knows the answer. That's from the Hagakure, which is a code of ethics on samurai behavior from the 13th century. But it's very easy to go online and do research and watch a YouTube video of someone else's experience and pollute yourself with all this information, but your belly knows. So get into your belly. Take 7 deep ones, and the answer will come. And respect it, whatever it is, because at a certain level, you already know.
Dude, spoken like a true genius right there, man. A warrior poet, man. I love it. And guys, I know you enjoyed this show. Michael is such an amazing individual. Like I said way back at the beginning, I first heard him on Paul Chek's podcast, and now to be chatting with him on this show is a dream come true. So if you guys loved the show, I'd love a 5-star review. Helps us get the show out to more and more people just like you, which we are so appreciative of. And wherever you guys are in the world, whatever you're doing, I hope you're having the best day ever. And as always, may the source be with you to infinity and beyond. Peace for now, everybody.